My name is Mark Runco. I'm a career coach in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I work with Cecilia and her advising team um, to find some great alumni panelists to kind of come to the event today and speak to you all about their experience. But also with any of the events that we do, we also will kind of find a way to drop in some career success type information. And so that's going to be the first part of the event today is really me just going over some career success type stuff. And then we'll transition over to the alumni panel and get some Q&A with them and learn about their story and kind of realistically, I think that's more of the information that you want more than to kind of hear from me about career success type stuff. But with all that being said, I do have a handful of links that I am dropping in the chat now. Some of these things are going to be links to information that I'll touch on as we go through. So just keep these handy. You don't really have to spend a lot of time looking at them now, but at some point during my presentation, I will reference those. And then I'm also going to do a quick screen share and share a PowerPoint and get that started. Cecilia, you're kind of my eyes on the other side. You just have my PowerPoint slide up, is that right?
Yep, it looks great. I just see the first slide.
Okay.
Looks perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you do have questions as we go along, just drop them in the chat. I try to pay attention to that. Something always blinks, but I'll try to come to your question as soon as I see it. But as we go through this, just if you do have questions and you want to jot them down and maybe ask when we're done, that'd be fine too. Well, if you need any accommodations, all you have to do is reach out. I will make sure that we accommodate you in the best way possible. So today's event or tonight's event is Sociology and Criminology. And really what we're going to focus this first part on is like the first steps when you're thinking about getting your job search strategy formulated, where you go from there, how you put some things together so that you can transition into maybe that internship search or job search. And again, like I said, I'm a career coach in the College of Arts and Sciences. Typically the career communities that I work with are marketing, advertising, and public relations, and then journalism, sports, entertainment, and production. But Cecilia and I have worked with each other on a couple of events throughout this year. And so we just kind of collaborated on this event to bring it to you today. So I know I'm kind of out of my scope of career communities, but been still working with Cecilia. And so we just figured this would be an easy project or task to kind of take on. So if you do need me, my email is runco.4. I always drop that in the chat at the end of the presentation, but if you need to email me after the presentation, feel free to take that down. Our office is trying to be better at being on social media a little bit more. I try to post events that we have or some cool articles. So you can also follow me there. So an agenda for tonight. Like I said, I'm going to go over some career success type things here to get started. My first part is going to be about the readiness competencies. I'll move over to resumes, transition a little bit into a little bit of research strategies, talk about some networking, and bring informational interviews to the surface. Give you something to kind of think about as you're on your quest for maybe an internship or a job. Help you with developing ideas for your elevator pitch, and then on to the main event, onto the question and answer portion with our alumni panelists. So just wanted to kind of map out the night and kind of let you know where we're headed. So one thing that our office will always talk about when we dive into any sort of presentation or anytime we meet with a group of students are the readiness competencies. So the readiness competencies were given to us by NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And really what NACE's job, or what they focus on, is showing hiring tendencies and their practices. And so if you look up NACE as a whole, it's a really interesting kind of dynamic. But when we work with them from a career services perspective, it's really trying to figure out how we can help our students make that transition into to the working world, and how we can find some some cool under the surface tips to relay back to our students. So we've developed, with their help, a list of competencies. And these competencies, even since I've started in the office about a year ago, they've actually increased. We had a couple less, but as time goes on, these competencies evolve. And so I see this being a thing where they're constantly evolving. We may subtract some and we may add some, but I think it's always going to be a kind of like living group of competencies. So we have 10 now. And so when the biggest thing for me when I think about competencies, and when you're maybe working on resumes or thinking about this job search or internship search, what you should be thinking about is how do you draw those competencies back into your experiences? So when I meet with students, a lot of times when they talk about their jobs, and they may not want to put that retail job or that fast food job on their resume, but I think there are so many under the surface skills inside of those jobs that you're not necessarily thinking about, that you're failing to think about how you had to establish or develop good communication skills. And that's one of the first competencies employers are looking for. Working well with others. How do you work in a teamwork dynamic? Again, you probably had those experiences in those jobs that you may or may not be giving a lot of credit to. So for all of these, there's ways to tie these back to jobs you maybe already had, or even jobs that you've had that are relevant to your industry, but maybe you forgot to talk about how you leverage technology. Maybe you were on their social media account and you were posting for them on a regular basis. So just try to take all these competencies, and these competencies are in the links that I sent you. That's one of the direct links that I sent you. And so you can always research those a little bit more on your own. But I just wanted to kind of give you the heads up on what these competencies are, and also why they're important to you as you're starting the search. And so again, they're attributes or skills that employers are looking for on the resumes. And then so based off of all of those, and some of these don't even fit into those attributes that I just showed you in the 10, but these are some other ones that you could think about. So problem solving skills, really that comes back to applying logic. Ability to work in teams, again, that's that teamwork dynamic. But then there's something interesting where the last three on here were not detailed in any of those competencies, but being able to display this and show this is something else that you would want to think about. So being able to be flexible and adaptable has been, in me in my career, I think about how I've been able to change this a little bit. I don't think when I started, I was incredibly flexible or adaptive to situations. But as time goes on, and anybody can attest to this who works in higher ed, but you have to be flexible and you have to learn how to roll with the punches. And so if you're not like that now, if you find that you're not really that flexible in your working style, trying to find ways to add that into what you're doing and trying to find ways to be better at that is only going to help you out. Being detail oriented, if you know that you just gloss over things and you don't give them a lot of attention, well, that's definitely something that you should work on, because we're noticing here that employers are saying these are things they're looking for. So again, with this whole list, it's really just showing you and pointing out things that employers are telling us that they're looking for. And we're just trying to relay that back to you to make sure that you're finding ways to add that back into your resume. So as you research the competencies, and this goes back to that first list of 10, and I don't want to go over all of these. I hate to just kind of belabor this point, but when you think about ways to expand on those, and then also maybe if you don't have those under your belt right now, how can you be better at that? And that's probably the bigger question that you might have, is like, how do I talk about applying logic, or how can I work on that? And so we've listed out or kind of mapped out a handful of ways. If good communication, say like oral communication, is not good for you, how can you be better at that? Maybe taking a course in public speaking can help you sharpen those skills. Even something like joining clubs. There's an organization called Toastmasters And if you join that, you would learn how to write speeches. You would have to give speeches. And so that's something that you could do to kind of sharpen that skill. So there's definitely ways to work on all of these, but we're just trying to point out, ways that you could start thinking about that, or to start to lay down those tracks. If haven't used technology, when we think about technology, really, it's maybe, how do you use social media? Where do you use social media? Not just for your own, personal, everyday life, but have you ever been in charge of an organization or a company, small business? Have you ever been a part of their social media platforms? Have you ever had to run something like that? Have you created stuff in Photoshop that you've had to use back into their social media platforms? So, and if you haven't, then maybe this is a great opportunity to take a class to where you could learn how to use something like Photoshop or InDesign, and start to kind of craft those skills. If you have not worked on owning your own career, meeting up with somebody like me or another career coach in our office to start to talk about what your career is going to start to take shape of, that might be something that you would want to do as well. So just wanted to touch on a few of those, try to point the things that are out that are important to us, and spend some time talking about that. All right, so changing gears here just a little bit, wanted to talk about resumes. So on our website, on the guides and tip sheet link that I sent you, the first drop down is the resume section or portion of that. And actually, in the first link there is a template that we've created that you can easily download and start to plug in your own information. So if you download that Word document, you take out the name that's in there and you include your name. And then you just kind of start to develop that template as your own. And so the components I wanted to highlight today were some of the basic, or just important sections of the resume. So when you look at pretty much any resume, it has some contact information, especially with students who are just getting ready to get out of school, and you'll probably have education on the top part of your resume for years to come. So you want to include that. Work experience, and when you're using work experience, that could be worded as work experience, relevant experience, or additional work experience, depending on if your jobs have been relevant to the industry or the job you're applying for. If it's relevant, then you want to note that it was relevant. If it's just other work and some other types of work you did, but it's not really relevant to this field or industry, you want to be mindful that you're not just saying relevant when it's really not necessarily relevant to that field. So being mindful of the sections and how you word those is going to be important. Then I have listed here a skills section. So this is something where you can talk about technical skills. Is it computer skills? Do you have experience working in Adobe and Microsoft? Are you well versed in the Apple operating systems, as well as a regular PC? Things that may be relevant to that industry. If they use a software all the time, and if you do have experience with it, you want to note those things. So being very, very aware of where you're applying or that industry or focus, and making sure that you're kind of talking their language is going to be it's going to be to your advantage. Any hard skills you have or soft skills that, again, may be tying back to that industry. And then let me see what else. So miscellaneous sections. Anything that you've done outside of work. So is it volunteer? Is it leadership? Have you taken, a lot of awards in some areas? And so being able to add those to your resume could be important too. It just depends on, you don't have to list volunteer experience, or you don't have to list leadership, but if these are things that you've achieved, then you want to make sure that you're kind of noting those, because it could help you out moving forward. So now with the different industries and different professions, I know that this field, you guys could have some different spins on resumes and a little bit of a different flow. And so on our website, we have a whole section devoted to government type resumes. We also have a handful of links that might help you as you're trying to develop this. So I'm giving you sort of the basics, a good starting point or jumping off point. But then if you do want to look in the guides and tip sheet, and then there's a government positions resume sample section, you can jump in there and start to see what might benefit you more. There are different things that different industries want over others, and so we have some recommended sites. The gogovernment.org, USA Jobs is one that is like a go-to. It's a staple. BestplacesToWork.org. I think that this was a really kind of interesting site as I learned more about it. Having annual survey of government employees, I think that's pretty interesting, especially if you're looking to move into that field. And then we have the federal hiring reform. And this one was, if you just go to the opm.gov, you'll be able to find it. It's kind of like a long link to follow without having that in front of you. But if you just go to the opm.gov, you'll be able to find what's going on with federal hiring practices, which, it's going to be different today than it was 5 years ago. So knowing what's current and what's relevant today, if you meet with somebody, if I talk to you today, that could change tomorrow. And so just being up to date and up to speed on what some of those important hiring practices are within the federal hiring process, that's where you want to go. And if that's where you're going to find yourself, making sure you're kind of up to date on all of those. So moving on to research. Research is important because it gives you an opportunity to learn more, about your industry and where you're thinking you want to go. What this can also do, I think, is even more important, besides helping you kind of reinforce your idea that this is the job you want to do, this is where you see yourself. It's also really good to find out, the more research you do, the more that you realize this is not for me. And sometimes that could be just as gratifying as figuring out this is what you want to do. But sometimes it helps you just maybe, not think about something anymore, kind of leave it in the dust. And so that's also a good thing. So when you're researching, you're trying to figure out, what the day in the life of looks like for this, for these people. What's their office culture like? Are they out in the field every day? It's going to depend on you and what you want to do and where you see yourself. But having some context as to what your life may be once you get into a role like that, that's going to be really important, because what you see on TV or what your one friend talks about is not always the case of where you may be. And so doing that kind of research can help you, decide if that's the right thing for you or not. And then is similar, continuing on the research path, when you're thinking about where would I look or how would I look for jobs? So it's almost like you would be job searching or looking for an internship. The more time that you spend doing that, that's where you can start to get the idea of, what does this job title mean? And is this job title kind of interchangeable in different fields? So it may be called, something for this company or this organization, but in another company or another organization, they may call it the same thing, but it has a totally different feel. And you'll see that just because one company calls it does not mean it's kind of the staple for everyone. So, having a good understanding of what the job titles mean, but then also what that job description all kind of encompasses, what the scope of the work will be like. So knowing where to look. So there's so many places to look for jobs, but if you want to just start to get an idea, on our website, under all the career communities, there's a list of very relevant job search sites specifically to that industry. So going there and just checking that out. And then also bigger things like Ohio Means Jobs, or a bigger kind of nationwide search like an Indeed would be a nice place to just kind of get started, throw in some very basic search items, where you want to be. So if you want to just stay in Columbus, you could filter those searches down by area that you're working in. and then the job titles that you think you know, and that may even lead you down a whole different kind of rabbit hole of, maybe they talk about that one specific job title, but then it changes up a little bit, and you start to even just see it evolve just while doing this research. Another thing that you can do is go directly to a company or organization's website. Sometimes we think so broadly and so big that we forget about the easy things and like the simple things. And so just go directly to a company's website or an organization's website and see what they have. A lot of times, if you follow their careers or their employment or jobs page, you'll be able to find some things that they have, whether it be an internship or a job application. So that's something you could do that's pretty easy. If you haven't started with a LinkedIn profile yet, I would definitely recommend doing that and getting set up on that platform. I'm definitely a proponent of LinkedIn. I definitely believe in it working and having positive benefits and impacts. The more that you can network with other individuals who are in your line of work, it's only going to help you out. But then also there, you can do that research. You can check out where you find people or what kind of jobs they're doing. Just something really easy to do is just going on there and searching OSU, and you can find the school's website or the school's LinkedIn page. Then you can find alumni, and then you can even whittle this search down to, say, like criminal justice or attorneys. And then you can start to look up the alumni who have that in their title and see what they're doing. You can kind of, look up their career trajectory and see how they got started, where they're at now, maybe how long it took them, just to start to get that baseline idea of, how long it may take you to get to where you want to be. Now, everybody's path is, very, very different, but it at least can kind of help you start to gauge it and figure out where to go, or, where to get a start at. Then we also have Alumni Fire. Alumni Fire is just for OSU students or alumni. You can jump in there, develop a profile, and then alumni who are in there, they're in there willingly. They've made a pretty calculated effort to be there to help out other students, and so the alumni who are in there are waiting to be asked questions. Like that was the whole point of jumping into that website. So knowing that you have this resource as an OSU student, so if you have never looked at Alumni Fire, I definitely recommend checking that out and just getting a feel for the platform. All right, so moving on to networking. So networking is really important. I mean, if you're not networking on LinkedIn, I really feel like you should be. But then if now we've kind of all been put in the bubble a little bit, and we're not able to get out there and network maybe like we used to. But networking does give you an opportunity to practice your communication skills. So even if you are doing it on LinkedIn, you're still doing it. You're still working on some different types of communication, but it's still a communication skill. It's how do you talk the best through through email or messages. Are your messages working? Or are they not working? When they're not working, when is it time to change it up and use something different? And so just knowing how to use that type of communication is going to be important for you moving forward. It's also an opportunity to gain some feedback on your resume. So if you are networking with somebody, and if you do, do as I said, jumping on LinkedIn, linking up with people who have a similar background to where you want to find yourself, you could always ask them for some feedback on your resume. If you're not getting it from a career coach like myself, then maybe asking another peer who's doing a job that's very, very similar to what you want to do. Maybe asking them what they see that you're maybe lacking, because they know the field or they know that industry. So it's always a simple thing to do to ask me, just take a quick peek at your resume. And then it gets you a chance to get some insider information, as we said here. So what kind of job do you find yourself doing? Where do you want to be? But then if you start talking to those people, it gives you an idea of how happy is that alumni that I talked to? Do they love their job, or are they kind of miserable? And if they're kind of miserable, does that make you second guess where you want to be? And so it's a great way to kind of gauge the level of happiness from those kinds of employees. So networking during COVID, I think is, I'm just trying to be an optimist about it here, but I think it's, made networking online a little bit more kind of mainstream. So maybe not everybody was doing it before, but, now everybody, it's really kind of the only way to do it. So there are plenty of ways to get online and to check out different platforms. But before you start doing that, maybe you want to check your online identity. If you have different profiles, different social media accounts, and they're maybe not showing you in the best light, or I guess most professional light, it's probably a good idea to maybe lock those down, or just change up the way that you're doing things from now moving forward. So if somebody does find you, they don't have reservations about maybe talking to you. There's a way to audit your network. Again, same type of thing. See who's in your network, and then make sure that those people kind of fit the industry goals that you have. Get comfortable with technology. So, like thinking about something like Alumni Fire. If you've never used it, it's like any social media platform that you jump on. The first couple of times, it's a little scratchy, it's a little wonky to kind of get used to. But the more time you spend in it, the more familiar with the platform that you'll be, and the easier it will be to navigate. And so, making sure that you spend the time getting comfortable. And so, all of these things are just really simple ideas, but it's just just some ideas that we have to try to help you get comfortable. So, what do you do first? How do you get started with all of this stuff? So, the easiest thing is to maybe make a 1-minute commercial. I'm going to talk about an elevator speech here in a minute, but maybe try to make a commercial. Think about your networking goals. Why are you doing it, and what are you trying to accomplish? Stay organized. I preach this whenever I meet with any students. Getting organized with your documents, your resumes, your cover letters, any other documents that you may need for employment. So making sure that you keep everything organized so that you're not wasting time looking for things. And then create a small list. If you get a list going to get started, that'll make it easier once you start thinking about like, where do I even begin? So figure out who's already in your network, and then start working from there. So I'm going to buzz by this one real quick, just because I'm running a little bit short on time here. Social media accounts. I love LinkedIn. I think jumping on there and getting acclimated to that platform is probably going to be pretty helpful. Create a good profile for yourself. Like, this is your, kind of like your personal brand here in a way. So create a nice profile, bring in some of the stuff that you use in your resume and drop that into your profile. A nice headshot, a very professional looking headshot. Take a friend out with you on a nice sunny day, something like this. Cool, like OSU background theme, or a nice, kind of wooded area, something like that. But very professional looking. Picture is going to be a benefit or a nice thing to have. And then, so after you kind of have your profile set up, requesting connections is going to be the key. So trying your best not to be shy, putting yourself out there, and finding people who are in professions that you find yourself in, so that you can ask them those questions. How did you get there? How much time did you spend in these entry level positions? Whatever questions you have on your mind, when you connect with these folks, that's what the platform's there for. It's a professional networking site. So, not being shy to ask those questions is going to be, the key to success. Informational interviews are awesome. They're kind of, a way to get in front of an employer without maybe actually having an interview set up. And so if you've never heard of an informational interview, I dropped in a link to what an informational interview is. I won't spend too much time on it again, because I know I'm short on time, but looking into informational interviews will definitely help you out. We even have a list of questions to help you just get prepared for an informational interview. But typically employers are pretty open to informational interviews, because they know you're trying to learn. You want to learn about their position, their job, or maybe their office environment. And so most people are open to hearing your request about an informational interview. So taking the time to kind of get those set up would be definitely a pretty big benefit for you. And then writing your elevator pitch will give you the tips. Again, this is another link I dropped in the chat. But trying to just come up with a really quick and brief, it's based off the idea, if you were in the elevator with somebody, could you tell them, about yourself in a short amount of time that would be impactful, that would stick with them, and that they would understand who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And so we just kind of broke it down into like 4 elements. It's just your name, an indication of your present situation or status, an overview of some of your skills or strengths or experiences, and then a reference to like a next step. Now, a lot of times that we've also kind of geared ours towards meeting somebody like at a college fair or career fair. And so here's just one quick example of like what a pitch would sound like. So, hi, my name is Mark Runco. I'm in my junior year at Ohio State, studying communications with a focus on journalism. Last year, I wrote 3 articles for the Lantern. This year, I plan to get 6 more published. I'm also the president of the journalism club at OSU. It's my understanding that Gannett is looking for interns to write for their papers and other media platforms. And I would really enjoy getting a chance to write for like such a large company like yours. Do you know who I could connect with to learn more about our internship program? So again, that was, I said my name, my indication of my present situation or status, a quick overview of my skills or my experiences, and then a reference to the next steps. So in that document, it lays it out just like this, but I just wanted to kind of give you a brief example of what that would sound like or what it would look like. So yeah, so I know I just buzzed through a lot of stuff, but before we kick it over to the panel, does anybody have any questions about the career success type information I just went over there real fast? Sorry, I felt like a speed talker there towards the end, but I was just trying to get it all out, but I'm excited to get to the panel. So again, I'll drop my information in the chat before we get off, but I would love to just get over to our panelists. So we have, so I see most of the folks on the call right now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my share. And all right. So what I'd like to do is just kind of buzz it around the horn, and I just have an order from the people, from the ways I have the names kind of collected. So what I'd like to do is just go around the group and let the panelists introduce themselves. And just for now, let's just go with a quick just introduction, what your, I guess, what your degree was in and what you're currently doing now. So I think those would be the first couple of things just to get started. So just so the students can start to get an idea of who you are. So Steve, I want to start off with you. If you just introduce yourself and say hello.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to be on. Steve Mason. I'm with CARD. First off, my degree was criminology. I graduated in 1994, and yes, I understand that makes me kind of old officially compared to the rest of you, but that's okay. I work for Cardinal Health. I'm the CEO for our medical segment, and Cardinal Health overall is a Columbus-based, Dublin-based company that we specialize in pharmaceutical distribution, medical product distribution, med device manufacturing, as well as direct-to-consumer provider for chronic conditions direct to patients. So I'm looking forward to being on tonight. I realize I'm a little non-traditional to some of the degrees from criminology and criminal justice, but excited to be on and share some of my experiences.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Let's go to Charles.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Charles Noble. My degree was in Sociology and Criminology, graduated in 2007. Currently, I'm the Chief of Staff at Columbus State Community College, and also I have a dual appointment to work as an Assistant Attorney General, practicing law on behalf of the college as well. In this role, I manage the 3 boards of the college, the Board of Trustees, the Real Estate Board, Columbus State Community Partners, as well as our foundation board. I'm working on a number of special projects looking at different ways that we can engage the community surrounding Columbus State and the larger regional community, and then thinking about ways and opportunities for us to expand workforce opportunities as well. So that's the 45-second overview of this role. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Charles. Do we see, is Becca here?
I am. I know my thing says Graham Sua. It's not me. I'm Becca. But hi, everyone. My name is Becca Cans. My undergraduate degree was in criminology and criminal justice. I also had a minor in political science and history. And then I went straight through to law school. I graduated from Ohio State's law school in 2020, so very recently. And I work at the Ohio Attorney General's office, and I am in the environmental enforcement section.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I was looking for your name and I did not see it. So that definitely threw me off. So thanks for clarifying. Yeah. All right, Casey, you're up next.
Hey guys, super thrilled to be here. I graduated from Ohio State in 2013. I studied criminology and political science. I was a double major. Started out actually in the political world. I was a senior legislative aide at the State House for about 2 years straight out of college, and then decided to make the jump into the criminal justice world. And so I've worked as a juvenile probation officer, a felony probation officer. I'm now with it's called the Community Supervision Unit within the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. So we are more colloquially known as the field team. So anything that happens outside the walls of the department is our responsibility. So we do any like address verifications, residential visits, arrests, transports, searches, pretty, like I said, anything that happens outside of the walls of the probation department in the courthouse falls on us.
Very good. Very interesting. Pretty detailed stuff there. Yeah, so the last one that I have is Claire.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire. I am a pretty recent grad from Ohio State. I graduated in May of 2019, so a little under 2 years now. But after graduating from Ohio State, I headed back home where I'm from in Connecticut, and I've been working at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for the past 2 years. I'm a paralegal there, so I was in a trial bureau for the first year, and now I am in the Special Victims Bureau, specifically in the Child Abuse Unit. And I am applying to law school right now, and I will be heading there in fall of 2021. Or I guess I'm done applying and I'm deciding where to go. So yeah, I'll be heading to law school then. Thanks.
Awesome. Good luck making that decision. It's a big one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for the introduction. My plan of attack for this portion is to maybe just ask a couple of questions, and my real hope is that the students are prepared with questions of their own so that they can learn about you. But I'm just going to get it started, and then I'll love to open it up to, and some of the advisors too. You all may have some good questions that students typically ask, so maybe you all could chime in too. So, well, I will get the party started, and then just kind of let any of the panelists who want to jump in or maybe feel strongly about talking about their scenario or situation, that'd be great. But I guess the biggest thing I'm thinking about and knowing what you all do is what's like a typical day. Now, I know we don't have typical days anymore, but what does a typical day look like for you, and what are some tasks that you may be doing? So again, any panelists, anybody want to jump in and just kind of give that brief overview of what a day looks like for you?
I bet Steve has the most interesting days.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually have a presentation I'm in for the day in life of what I do already with my team here in a couple of weeks that I was preparing for. When you think about one of the things that I would describe that should be in anyone's day every day is, when what we do in healthcare for Cardinal Health, we provide products and solutions that improve the lives of people every day. And I say that a lot. And so when you think about when I get up in the morning, the first thing I'm thinking about typically is what we deliver for customers. And I've got certain dashboards that I look at to say, okay, how does service look? We've got a tremendous amount of employees. So I'm thinking about culture and how are we driving the right kind of culture with the customer backwards. And so typically, just like the rest of you, my days are a lot of Zoom calls. So we've learned to adjust in the new environment. But I like to think we all start with the mission of what we've got to get done and work backwards. I'll start there and kick it to the rest of the panel.
I guess I'll talk about the day that I've had today. So woke up, had a few touch base meetings with some of my colleagues on cabinet. I think it started at about 8 o'clock today. At 9 o'clock, we moved to a 3-hour-long part 2 of a cabinet retreat where we're looking at how we're going to invest our stimulus money from CARES and other federal funding allocations around strategic priorities that Columbus State has. Went from there to a call with the marketer who were trying to help us think through some of our community engagement strategy, then to a 2-hour board meeting where we were working with the board to kind of walk through a series of strategic conversations around what Columbus State is looking to do over the next 3 years. And so it bounces around between high-level strategy, between operational stuff. I need to write some emails and check up on some things. Checking in with people to see how they're doing, an eye towards how students are. Another big part of our work is thinking through how we reopen through COVID. It was easier to shut down than it is to open back up. And so working with some of the operational teams to address those issues. And so I think that, along the day, as Steve mentioned, it's really about being grounded in, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Because sometimes the work takes you away from really that close connection to the mission of the college. But ultimately, hopefully, everything that I'm doing each day is getting us a little bit closer to realizing the promise of what it is that we are.
I'm happy to jump in as well to describe I have a paralegal at a prosecutor's office. It's obviously very different, and I've only been there for 2 years, and I can only speak to where I've been. But it's again, like the previous 2 panelists who just spoke, it can change every day. And I think a lot of it is, especially being at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, it's, one of the bigger district attorney's offices in the country. And you're running around a lot. It's changing all the time. And especially being in a bureau like mine, which is the Special Victims Bureau, you're meeting a lot with members of the public. So I don't think I mentioned, I did major in criminology, sociology, and a minor in political science. So it's a lot of working with the public, working with the community, with victims, their families, as well as the defendants as well, and trying to find the best outcome for everyone. So I guess, obviously now in COVID times, things are a lot different. We're sitting at our desks at home rather than being in the courtrooms. But when we're in the office, it's a lot of running around and running to the courts and filing things, and in between interviewing people, victims, family members. You're doing a lot of document collection, analyzation, reviewing evidence, phone extractions, forensic evidence, pretty much anything and everything prosecutors will ask you to help with on cases. And it'll vary from bureau to bureau and what exactly your focus is. But again, it's something I love doing, and it's been really great to be a part of. So I'd recommend anyone looking into paralegal jobs for a wide array of roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, Mark, you definitely hit the nail on the head when you said there is no normal day, especially when, I come into the office every day. I don't know what's waiting for me, and that's part of the joy. I kind of love that. And so, just kind of following the example of what did today look like. Today, like I said, we're responsible for transporting offenders. So my partner and I had to transport an offender from one of our jails here in Franklin County down to one of the Albus facilities down in Chillicothe, and then we came back to Columbus, and we were all over the west side helping out our sex offender supervision unit doing address verifications. And so, you're just all over the place. Tomorrow, I'm driving to Cleveland and back to bring an absconder back from Cleveland to clear the warrant here in Franklin County. So, it's just every day is a little bit different. Our goal, Franklin County Adult Probation, FCAP, FCAP, we modified that to kind of like our pseudo mission statement is facilitating change, achieving progress. So everything that we do, we're trying to fit it into that model. How can we facilitate change in the offender and achieve progress for them? And so what I'm always looking at and what I'm trying to do is because they're on community supervision, they're inherently not they're not incarcerated. And so they're out living among us. They could be our next door neighbor. And so what am I doing to help make them someone who I would want to live next door to? And so trying to take some of that, I guess, sting out of, the victim's life, knowing that that person might be out walking around, making sure that they are someone who we don't mind having in the community. And my goal is always, how can we make this your last experience with the criminal justice system?
So I can go. So I guess first and foremost, our theme at the Ohio Attorney General's office is do big good. So it's a little bit different because I have a client, like I said, I'm in environmental enforcement. So technically my client is the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, but really our client is the state of Ohio. So every day that's what we're working to do is we're working for the citizens of Ohio. So, but also I'm probably the newest in my job and my profession. So every day for me is just learning what it means to be an attorney because I still have no idea. I'm like 6 months in. But I would say my typical day, it's a lot of Zoom calls with co-counsel, strategizing on cases, trying to learn what I'm supposed to be doing on cases. And then also I'm in a litigation-based section. So it ramps up and then it goes down again. So like a couple weeks ago, I was in the office actually for once. We're work from home, but I was in the office and it was exciting. And we were preparing for a hearing. So it really just depends on the day for me as well.
If Becca said something really interesting that I think for the college students on the line, when you think about what your day is like, we all heard some themes through that. First off, all day long, you're going to be communicating. So some of the things that Mark talked about in the beginning around the skills employers are looking for, having great communication skills is just absolutely critical, and you're going to use them a lot. The other is, and I heard a lot of folks say this, throughout the day, you're asking a lot of questions, you're showing curiosity, you're trying to solve problems. And that is something that regardless of what profession you're in or what you're doing, you're going to be doing that constantly. And the people that really excel at what they do they do that with a lot of finesse, is what I would describe. And then the third thing is, you're gonna need to know what it is you're supposed to get done that day. And the people that can really understand what success looks like each and every day and gets after it, they really stand out in any job or profession. So I think those are some themes that we all do all day long, every day, as you think about your career.
Steve, you mentioned something, related to communication, I think is really on point. Part of what we do each day is try to anticipate what's going to happen, so that we can be prepared. But things happen every day that we can't anticipate. And being able to manage your emotional regulation, being able to think, critically about how to move forward, I think is also the other side of the communication, because people, your colleagues, you students, staff, faculty, advisors, live outside of our jobs as well. And so my one go back would be I got an email the other day where a student was asking us to mention what's happening and how they feel about watching the Derek Chauvin trial, and the trauma that it's eliciting from them, and as they're trying to study for finals. And so I think that awareness, of the world beyond, I think is also something good to bring into your day-to-day as well.
Yeah, all of the stuff that you all do is just was really fascinating just to learn about. I thought that was an important first question so that the students can kind of start to get an idea of who you are, what you're doing in a normal day or a typical day. And I know those are few and far between anymore, but just kind of what your day-to-day might look like. But yeah, those were all just unreal, like some of the stuff that you guys are all doing. Helping all of us out was awesome. Do any of the advisors have any questions, or do any of the students want to chime in? And feel free to unmute yourself. I have the chat up in front of me too. So if you do have some questions that you want to ask through the chat, I wouldn't mind kind of relaying that. But does anybody have any questions they want to bring to the surface?
I have a question if none of the students do. We've heard a little bit about your current day, if you would just take a second to transport yourself back to your senior year and tell us a little bit about your mindset, what you were doing at that time, and did you do anything in your senior year to really make a difference in how you began career-wise?
I remember I was driving around 270 with my dad, I think in between my junior and my senior year. And he asked me what I was going to do when I graduated from college. And that scared me because I had no idea. And I started taking, I think, my academic journey a little bit more seriously then. I was also doing an internship at the Treasurer of State's office. And I thought that I wanted to do public policy. And she steered me towards urban planning. And so I believe at the time there was a consortium of schools that Ohio State was in that offered, some sort of communication opportunity with other schools, based on the academic profile. So I went to go visit the University of Maryland, loved it. I got a master's there in urban planning. But I think it was kind of those successive steps of not having any clue what I was going to do, and using that as a good catalyst to start taking, this next step of the journey more seriously.
Susan, if I answer your question with total honesty, I was like petrified when I was at that age. And I don't want to scare any of the seniors, but we all know that it was just such an interesting time in our lives for those of us that have gone through it. I actually had this dream of being an FBI agent, and it's why I went into criminology. And so when I finished my senior year, you start going through the process, and I didn't on first pass, didn't get a nod of any kind from the FBI. So I guess the one thing I would instill in the students as you go through and you try to figure your career out is I also had an open mind and some flexibility. So then I decided I'd go to law school, got accepted into law school, and then some really, really great person gave me some advice to do the math behind what I was going to take on in student loans and what I was going to earn as an FBI agent, and the math didn't work. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a lot of the things Mark laid out, start networking, start doing some research, start figuring out what are the other things in the marketplace. And I found this little company in Dublin, Ohio called Cardinal Health, who literally some friends, mothers, husbands, administrative assistant through my network got me an interview to potentially run the copy room. And I'm not making this up. This is a fact. I interviewed to run the copy room at Cardinal Health in 1994, and I didn't get the job. And so the great part about that story is that I was super energetic. I'm like, hey, if something else comes up or someone else, I'm still interested. And someone called a few weeks later. I say all that because as you build out your career, I really thought I knew what I wanted to do at that age. And then when I walked into a business that was in healthcare, I fell in love with healthcare. I fell in love with our culture. It was a place that really valued what I did, created a great environment, and it's something that I unexpectedly fell in love with, and it's turned out to be a really great career. And so the point of what I'm saying is it all comes together. It's just sometimes you might hit a couple detours along the way.
I can agree. I mean, what you guys said is exactly what I went through, a couple years ago as well, and the uncertainty and the frustration of applying to jobs and over and over again and doing your research. But, like Mark said earlier, and like you just said as well, Steve, I mean, the best thing for me was networking like crazy. And there'd be some days of thinking, what friend of a friend's uncle, cousin, brother, whatever, can connect you to talk for 5 to 10 minutes. And even if it's not where you want to work or you end up interviewing or even applying to, just learning more about the different places you can apply going out. And at that time too, I knew being a paralegal was definitely something I was interested in, and someone who was looking into law school down the road. And again, like Steve mentioned as well, it was a friend, pretty much a stranger who connected me to help me get an interview where I ended up. But the first job I interviewed in was the human trafficking unit. I didn't get it. It was so horrible, and then the next job I got in a trial bureau. So it really just comes down to spending the time to do the research. And as frustrating and as tiresome as that last semester might be, I know at this time I was, that semester I was very stressed out and tired of doing the networking and doing the 5 to 10 minute conversations, or sometimes longer, where you're just trying to figure out what the person is like and try to get them to know you. It's really, really worth it. And I think you'll be surprised in the end. Who knows? They might know someone who might know someone who can get your resume looked at and get your foot in the door. And so I think that was probably the most important thing in that time, despite all the uncertainty and scariness behind it all, is just to keep doing that.
Networking is absolutely key. That's, like I said, my first job out of college was at the State House. And so I was in a completely different world. I thought back then that, by the time I am where I am today, that I'd be getting ready to run for the Senate or something overly ambitious like that. But I kind of fell into that job because I'd been interning for a state representative and just kind of building that network at the State House. And I was running into roadblocks. I wasn't really getting many looks or many offers anyway for jobs going into the summer after my senior year. And so I just set up a meeting with the representative that I'd been interning with, and really just set it up as a, hey, this is what I'm interested in. If you hear of anything, let me know. If you could put in a word for me, let me know. And so I got down there, and as luck would have it, I sit down in his office, and the first thing he says is, well, my current aide is leaving to go to grad school. If you want to turn this into a job interview, we can. And so it just worked out perfectly that's how I kind of fell into that first job. And then as luck would have it, my resume had to go through the chief administrative officer for the House of Representatives. And he was a guy who I had never even heard of, but he had gone to my high school and was like 5 or 6 years ahead of me and grew up around the corner from me. And so, it's just, it really is, the cliche about it's all about who you know, it's a true thing. And so I was actually just reminiscing with my mom the other day about when I was, setting up internships in college, and, it seemed like I was always falling into them based on who I knew. And I was getting a little frustrated because the wide-eyed little naive Casey that I was wanted to earn it. I wanted to get it based on my merits. And so I asked Mom, when am I going to start getting jobs and getting looks based on me? And she said, hopefully never. Because, it really is about who you know. And just looking back on just about every job that I've had someone go before me that I had been able to build a friendship with that was able to open doors for me. And so I'm very, very thankful for those opportunities and for the people that have gone ahead of me that have helped set me up to get me where I am today.
Yeah, I'll just echo everyone else. Networking's huge. They preach it in law school too. And I was always like, but it is. And it's definitely awkward for sure. But like, you just got to do it. And people want to help, and they will help, and they'll meet with you. And so, yeah, networking is huge. Also, I would say, just as someone who interviewed a bunch in law school and got denied 5 million times over by different places, like, don't give up. If you didn't get the job, it wasn't a good fit, and there will be a good fit out there for you. But it can be discouraging sometimes, but something will fall into place.
And you'll always look back on the one you didn't get, and you'll go, what I got was so much better than that. And
Yeah.
it does, but you forget about it pretty quickly.
Yeah, it always works out.
I'll jump in and just add that I had a really bad anxiety my senior year, kind of as a result of undiagnosed ADHD. And so it was hard for me to get out and really network because I had negative associations with it. And I think part of it was kind of this fear of rejection. And so I think, this conversation is also about kind of knowing who you are and knowing yourself, and, and being willing to put yourself in challenging situations, because it kind of ebbs and flows. And I would also add, be okay with being interesting, be authentic, your passions, your joy, the things that you really love and care about, be confident and share those things with the world. Because I think that in addition to the networking side of it, it's also, about, who you are as a unique person and what you bring to the table.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, for just kind of reiterating the importance of networking. Like, you know, a lot of you just talked about that. And Casey, I mean, I share a similar story to where if I went down my resume, I could probably check off every job I had and tie somebody back to it that I knew that helped me get my foot in the door. Those people weren't getting the job for me. I had to go and seal the deal, right? And just like you did. But it's having that person kind of tie you back to the position and make you relatable to whoever you're speaking to. So networking isn't, you know, so important. It's helped me, and it sounds like it's helped a lot of you guys. Charles, you know, even with, you know, maybe having a little bit of that anxiety, definitely totally understandable. And it's not for everyone. Not everybody's a communicator and is outgoing. And some people have those, you know, those issues under the surface that maybe they don't even know about, similar like to what you had. But even doing something like being able to network and having a platform like a LinkedIn, you know, it may alleviate some of that stress. And so you're able to get out there and put yourself out there without maybe having to feel totally vulnerable, you know, and you know, get in that situation to where you may have to like do some public speaking. So there are definitely options, but it is really, really important. And it seems like a lot of, you know, the folks on the panel had, you know, a similar experience with that networking component. So I'm glad you all kind of had something to share about that. Any other advisors have anything else? Any other questions?
I have a question for Casey. Going back to the typical day, you mentioned that you're responsible for transporting offenders and facilitating change in them. And I wondered, because I'm a psychology and criminology double major, I wondered exactly what does this entail?
So in my role, it's a little bit more of a unique interaction that I have with the offenders. So I don't actually supervise a caseload currently. I've done that in past roles, but because we are out of the office pretty much all day, every day, my interactions with the offenders are very different from what they have with their actual supervising PO. But that being said, we do still get to play a really cool role in that because we have a quite literally a captive audience when they're in the car with us, you know, bringing them, you know, for instance, the guy that I'm bringing back from Cleveland tomorrow, I'm going to have him in the back seat of the car for 2.5 hours and he can't get away. So I can have some of those more difficult conversations and really kind of dig in and say, all right, what is it that got you to where you are? Where might have some of the breakdowns been? What can we do? What services can we put in place? What can we wrap around you to help break that cycle and break that chain? And so a lot of what we do is done really is kind of like a mini check-in session that they would have with their probation officer, but we're just doing it on their front porch a lot of times. And so, you know, we'll look through their case notes, we'll look and see what's going on, what they might be working on, what their risk factors are. And then we'll try to address those as much as we can, just in a much quicker kind of rapid fire setting to reinforce whatever the officer might be working on at that time.
That's really interesting. And do they typically respond well in the vehicles when you pose these questions?
They do, because typically we benefit a lot from the change in setting. They are coming out of a correctional facility and they know they're going to another one, but in the meantime, just to be out in more of a, you know, natural environment, I guess, like they're still in the back of a cruiser and they're still in handcuffs, but just to not be surrounded by the cinder block walls that they have been, I've noticed makes a big difference in some of the conversations that we have. And they're a little bit, it brings their guard down quite a bit, that we're able to have some of those conversations and they tend to be a little bit more open.
Thank you so much.
Awesome question. Thanks, Sierra. Any other students have any other questions? Try to keep on going with some questions. So have you ever has anybody from the panel ever participated in any other like maybe like volunteer positions that maybe help you advance your skill set? So thinking about, you know, trying to help others, but also maybe kind of help yourself at the same time and learn some skills or, some different traits or characteristics. Have you ever participated in anything that kind of helped you in your career?
I've been blessed to find a church home that's really important to me. And so through that, there have been opportunities to serve in the community. And I've been connected with the Columbus Dream Center that operates out of the Short North. And so just in volunteering there, they're a nonprofit. They do a lot of homeless outreach. I started doing just general street outreach. They have teams that go out on various nights of the week and work with the homeless population. It started through the Short North. And then from that, the group and the program has grown in such a way that now I've been able to lead my own team of people, and we've started targeting homeless encampments around the city. And so just having that opportunity to interact with a similar population that I do at work, but in a way that I'm reminded of their humanity has been really helpful to me at work. And so at work, it's very easy to see them as a case number or an ORC code or a violation or whatever it is that they might have done to put them in a situation that I'm interacting with them. Then to be able to go to the Dream Center and work with a very similar population outside of work, it's been able to remind me that these are people, these are human beings that I'm interacting with. There's a depth to it that I've found to be really helpful, and it's enriched my ability to communicate with people at work.
I was part of a national foundation called the Jack and Jill of America Foundation. Started off, I think, in 2014, and for the last 2.5 or 3 years I was on it, I was the chair of it. It was really interesting working with that board. It helped me understand the finances of nonprofits, a little bit of HR, also Robert's Rules of Orders and how things are structured, how motions, are made in committee and how it gets to the board for approval. And so thinking about the relationship of, most private companies have boards, most public entities end up reporting to a board of commissioners or a mayor or a city council. And so understanding how business moves, through organizations was really helpful in helping me understand a lot of what I do here at Columbus State and hopefully in other jobs as well.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things I'd add. I've had the privilege of sitting on the United Way of Central Ohio board, which is focuses on fighting poverty in Central Ohio, which is really great to be a part of. I would just suggest, and for the students on the phone, any type of activity that you get to leverage interpersonal skills, doing things outside of your normal comfort zone, it just shows versatility, especially as you're going into the workforce. So however you look at it, I mean, when I was younger, I did some volunteer work that I was able to that I enjoyed, that I was able to leverage on my resume. I'd be thinking about that. I have a sophomore at Ohio State, and she has a couple passions in those areas, and I always tell her, I'm like, look, if I'm the employer, I really like seeing that you give your time like that and you think differently. So I think that is really important, Mark, the way you laid it out on what kind of skills you develop.
I agree with Steve as well. I just want to piggyback off of what you said. I mean, it's so important to do these experiences, for yourself, and also they, like you mentioned, look great on a resume because it's showing that you are involved and active in all of that. And similar to kind of, what Casey had said and working in the criminal justice system, not really volunteering, but when I was at Ohio State, I was a part of the Ohio Innocence Project, or the Ohio State Collegiate Chapter. I actually helped, I was one of the co-founders my sophomore year of college. But that was great because, showed you it was the organization that supported Ohio Innocence Project, and we fundraised and advocated and spread awareness about wrongful conviction and all of that. So then moving into a prosecutor's office after that, like Casey had mentioned, obviously you're on the other side of the coin, but you want to make sure you're always doing fair and just work for the community as a whole. So, you want to make sure you do see people as people, even where they're defendants, and making sure that you're doing the right thing for the community at large. So whatever community you end up serving, I think it's an awesome experience to volunteer or, join a club that can show you a perspective of that community that might be different than what you're going to go into eventually, because it's helped me immensely kind of keep that perspective even when it's easy to forget.
Yeah, I'll echo what everyone else said. And also just having volunteered, like for a resume reason too, like if you're young and you're interviewing with people and they're asking you questions about your work history and behavioral questions, and you are just like behavioral questions like, tell me about a time when you did this. I remember I struggled giving the same answer over and over and over again because I've only ever been a server. And so I was like, I don't know, I'm so young, I don't have experience. What do you want me to say? So like, I think it's great to have experiences like that. I mean, for more than just interview reasons, but also for interview reasons. And also I didn't have very many volunteer opportunities in undergrad, which I would change if I could go back. But in law school, I worked at the Legal Aid Society of Columbus my 1L summer, and just an amazing way to help people and who can't help themselves quite simply because of the poverty line. And so that was a really great opportunity. And I do think if anyone's interested in going into the legal world or just helping people in general, they do take volunteers, like no matter what. So.
Yeah, definitely from reviewing resumes and talking with students about, things to add. I mean, I asked that for, with purpose, because if you're struggling for content to have on your resume, I think, having a volunteer experience, like Steve said, employers enjoy seeing that, but very similar to what Becca said, like whether it's not just for having it on a resume, but it's also for the experiences behind it. It gives you something to talk about, especially if your opportunities have been limited, at this point in your career. It still gives you something to talk about. It may not be technically work experience, but it's still experiences that you could probably share stories about. I mean, interviewing is pretty much storytelling 101, right? Like you're telling a story, tell me about a time when, or, describe this, and you're trying to relate it back to experiences in your life. So it gives you those opportunities to build those stories and those narratives for yourself. So definitely, another, key component to this process and what you all are embarking in on. So definitely ask that with some purpose. So thank you all for sharing. I guess one more question that I have about your job, and again, trying to get to the root of who you all are and what's important to you. But I'd like to just hear, probably the most rewarding aspect of your job. When you think about what you do, you all definitely seem very passionate in your careers. And so just wanted to know what you all find is the most rewarding component.
I'll start with a couple, and the first I would make personal, really close to home personal, meaning what we do for healthcare. Generally people don't know what Cardinal Health does. A lot of times, I live in Columbus, they always think we're a health insurance company, but the reality is we ship a third of all drugs that go to patients in the United States. We one way or another service 90% of the hospitals in the US. We operate in 100 countries. We do a lot of stuff. It's just amazing when that touches home, like personally. My mother had to have double knee replacement not long, and here she is, recovering in the hospital, and she's not worried about herself, and she's taking pictures of the Cardinal Health products that are around the room and sending it to me. And I got to be honest, that feels good. I really like that. I've always liked that aspect of what we do. It's part of our mission. But what rewards me, and so that's table stakes. But what I really enjoy with my job is, and I always describe it as, Cardinal Health's kind of been my home for 25 years. And I deeply care about this being a great place for people to work. and for people to be who they are. And the way I would describe that is, whether I sit on our LGBTQ employee resource group, I help ensure that they feel comfortable to come out at work. I want women to have the same opportunity as men as it relates to upward mobility in the company. I want anyone who comes into these four walls of our business to feel like they are appreciated and they give their all. And so I do a lot of things outside of what I would call my normal day job because I'm incredibly passionate about it. And then I'm going to break the rule. I'm going to go with a third thing. I love helping people develop their careers. It's been great to me. And Mark, I actually got on early because I wanted to hear the intro of the things that you're coaching the students on, because I do a lot of the same things. And one of the key things you said, which I really appreciated, was just knowing what your leadership brand is. And I tell young employees that all the time, because knowing who you are is an employee and what you're passionate about, what you're good at. People don't write that. They don't take the time to write that down, and then you can evolve that throughout your career. So those are some things that I really enjoy about what I do.
Good. Just going back to what I was talking about earlier, facilitating change, achieving progress. It's an easy thing to say, but then when you actually get to see it happen, and to see something that you've done, some interaction that you've had with an offender, and you get to see that needle move, even just a little bit, is really cool. It's a cool opportunity. And just to see the growth from the time someone comes from court and they're placed on probation to we get to have, up to a 5-year relationship with this person. And so, that's really what drew me into probation within the law enforcement world was, initially when I wanted to be in law enforcement, I thought that meant being a police officer. That's really all I knew. I knew police officers, I knew attorneys. I didn't really know that there were all these other branches that you could go into. And so I started looking into it. And so, my drive was I wanted to help people. I wanted, I had that big picture cliche answer of I want to help people. And so then as I started looking into probation and got to see that that's really where that change happens. That's where you really get to dig in, you get to invest, and you get to build that relationship that's going to help people and it's going to move that needle. That's hands down the most rewarding thing that I get to do. And, just to see that growth and to see that progression to where, in whatever field, whether it was juvenile or whether it's working with adults, just seeing them start to put the pieces together that, okay, if I go to this place, that's going to make me want to use drugs. And that's what got me in prison. And, just to, show them, okay, well then don't go to that place. Like you help them make those connections that seem so easy to us. But to them, it takes some piecing together. And it's just really cool to help make that happen.
Yeah, I can jump in as well. I mean, I think being in the sociology of criminology, a student at Ohio State, I think, we're all kind of in that sphere of being in the public and wanting to help people. And I think what the cool thing is about these panelists is we all have, done that in different ways. And it's really cool to see all the different, good things that are to do with the community with going forward. But yeah, like for me, I always knew, victim advocacy and working with victims and working with the public was something I wanted to do. And, being in the child abuse unit of the Special Victims Bureau, that's very easy to feel very rewarded working with, children who are, going through the worst times in their lives, arguably. I think 80% of our cases are sex abuse cases. So it's a lot of, getting down, and as a paralegal, you go face to face with kids and being a comforting face and kind of someone to help them going through, again, the worst times of their lives, and helping them navigate the sometimes really horrible process that is the criminal justice system, and just being there once you can. And I think I was very lucky, and this is my first job post graduation of Ohio State, and I love it, but I think it is important to realize it is just as important to find a job that you don't love as much, and figure out, hey, this isn't rewarding to me, and something else might be better. So I think I was very fortunate in that aspect of finding something that I really like and want to pursue later on after I have a law degree. But I think it's just finding that thing that makes it worth it, and what you want to do to serve the community is super important.
I guess I'll jump in. One of the favorite things, or one of the favorite parts about my job, and I think it's something that I like to do anyway, is just to take risks. I love to push the envelope. I love to think outside the box. I love to put things out there that may work or may not. And I think that all of that is hopefully within the context of trying to help move things that I care about forward. I have a cousin who is about a year older than I am. Similar, similar profile. The difference between him and I was that growing up, his mom was, addicted to substances. They were housing unstable. So he bounced around to school, et cetera. And, one of the things that breaks my heart is really kind of watching how our paths diverged, understanding that, we are very similar in a lot of ways. And so in pursuit of, I think, a more just world, more equitable policy, in pursuit of being able to transform the agencies that we live and work under in ways that really promote, I think, the dignity of different people and different skill sets is really something that I'll try to do wherever I'm at. And so here at Columbus State, as a front door of education to a lot of folks within the region. It's really great to hear people's stories of resilience. Great to hear, how they've moved forward despite facing certain barriers. And so it's really an honor, and maybe to say that it's fun. It is fun sometimes too, but it's also a great honor to be able to just help to move institutions, especially this institution, in a direction that continues to build on its capacity to help people reach and achieve their dreams.
Yeah, I can go next. So something I love about my job is that every single day they reiterate that like our theme is to do big good, for the citizens of Ohio. And like everyone else, like my main thing is that I want to help people. And my main reason for going to law school was exactly that. And I actually wanted to do criminal defense work. I'm not totally out of that realm yet, but I never imagined I would end up in environmental law. But the reason I wanted to do criminal defense work is because through my criminology degree, just learning, how terrible the criminal justice system is, especially towards people of color and people who don't have money. So that was really my reason for going to law school. So ending up in environmental, I was like, okay, like, how can I look deeper at these issues? And looking deeper at these issues, that people who are affected by environmental issues are also likely going to be people in like blighted areas. And they don't even know what's happening to them. So that's like the difference in environmental law is you don't know you're breathing in asbestos, like, you know what I mean? Unless you're told about it and you just have no idea. And then years down the road, like you have cancer and things like that. So I think my biggest thing is that although this wasn't what I saw myself doing with my career, I'm still able to pursue my passion.
Awesome. Yeah, just I definitely wanted the students to hear kind of what your like what Becca was saying, like what your passions are in your day and what you enjoy doing, and what means the most to you. So thanks for sharing all those ideas and what you all are doing. I'd love to hear from a student. I'm sure students have some questions to these folks. We've had one so far. Connor had one. He wants to know what is something looking back on college that you would have done better to prepare yourself for a career or life in general. So looking back, what could you have done? What's something you could have done to kind of prepare yourself for your career or just life in general? So anybody got a response to a student question?
I bounced around from, I basically went to 3 different colleges in 5 years, graduated from Ohio State my last couple of years. I started off playing football at Miami of Ohio, got injured, went to a school in Virginia and played there for a little bit. And at some point I realized that was not that wasn't my calling. And so the thing that I wish I had done better along the way was not think about college and then post-college sequentially. I think that, college was preparing you for what was going to happen next. And I think that they were so discreet for me that I wasn't taking advantage of the opportunities along the way that would have better prepared me to enter, whatever was next. And so I think it really is about seeing it as, training and preparation and really a low cost environment to help you develop the sorts of things in yourself that you think you want to play out or you want to flex at the next stage.
Yeah, the one thing I really wished I would have done that I think has picked up a lot of momentum since I was in school, which was a long time ago, was get more practical experience, internships, whether they were paid or unpaid. I wished I had done that. I might have learned a lot of other things about what I may have wanted to do by getting out into a real work environment. I always had a lot of jobs, but those weren't necessarily in any kind of professional setting. I wish I had done some internships.
This might sound kind of weird and oddly specific, but one of my biggest regrets from college is that I didn't pay more attention to the reading. Do the reading for class, because it's something that I learned that I could get good enough grades by just showing up to class and taking good notes. But then I missed out on a lot of really good content that now I've gone back and actually done some of the reading that I was supposed to do in college since I've graduated, and realized that there's a lot of really helpful stuff in there that's helped me, not just in my career, but in life in general. And so, now hindsight being 2020, looking back, I was supposed to do that reading for a reason. And there was something in there that I was supposed to glean that was going to set me up for success in some way, shape, or form, because someone way smarter than me picked that reading for us to do. And so do the reading.
I'll just repeat what we've been saying again, and sorry for the students if you're getting tired of this, but again, like networking again was so important, and I didn't start doing that till my senior year. So if I would have, I had great internships, and I kind of went, through the motions of the internships and all of that, but I wish, I went through and really tried to get to know people and put more into that. And in my mind, networking was always going to these structured events like career fairs or, I don't know, structured things where people are setting it up for you. But I think the best thing is to look through and think about the people in your life you may know, who may know people at companies that, you could talk to as early as you can. As annoying and as frustrating as it might be, it's so worth it in the end. And I wish I had done that, before my senior year of college, when it really started to get me and I started getting nervous about it. It would have been great to start a little earlier.
Yeah, I'll just say, talk to people in different careers. I mean, there's so many careers out there, and I know that can feel overwhelming. I knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew what I was learning in criminology, and it just made sense to go to law school. But there could be a million other things I could have done, to do what I want to do, and I could not be a lawyer. It worked out. I'm glad I'm a lawyer, but there's a million other career options out there, and I think just talking with people and having internships and getting practical experience, so you have a better idea of what you really want to do.
Yeah, all very kind of fascinating things. Still continuing talking about network, which you can never do too much of that. Casey, I love the point. Read what was in the readings. And a lot of people can just kind of skim by and just kind of get by on, the Cliff Notes version and not really pay too much attention and get into the weeds too much. So yeah, definitely really good advice. Jamie wanted to know if there are any internships at the probation office or any of the attorney general offices. So any of the folks who are in those areas, is there any advice that you can give to the students about maybe how to look for those, or do you know if any are open that they could look into?
I do know that the probation department does have internship opportunities. I will drop my contact info in the chat before I sign off here. So if anyone's interested, I can get you connected with our point person within the department for internships. But just going back to my experience as far as finding internships, you know, at the risk of sounding like a broken record here, that's where networking really comes into play, because participating in events like this and hearing from people, and just trying to make those connections with people that are in the field that you think you might be interested in, you know, that's how you're going to find out about internship opportunities. And, you know, there are some posted, I know, like I don't know the exact website, but the website that the state of Ohio posts all their job opportunities. I know they post a lot of like summer internships and things like that on there. But just making connections like this are probably the best way that I've found, because then there's that little bit more of a connection as opposed to just clicking submit on an application.
Yeah, for the Ohio Attorney General's office, I'm sure they have internships. I just started there this year, so I only know of their legal internships, but I'm sure they have other types of internships. It's just a huge place. I can also drop my information in the box and reach out to people at the office and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Advisors, do you guys have any questions or I guess like common themes that you feel like students are asking or wanting to know about that maybe this group can maybe help out with?
I was really curious if there is a class that you took at Ohio State that you perhaps think back on in your professional life, if you know, social theory or statistics or even a GE, if there's anything that you took that that just is you know, strong in your memory after being in your professional life.
I can start. One that came to mind. If you've already taken it, that'd be great. If not, you should definitely take it. It's Sociology of Poverty. It was one of the best classes I took at Ohio State. And I'm having trouble, the professor right now thinking of it. I believe it was Adam Long was his name, and he was my professor, and he was great. And it, you know, again, if you're looking into the criminal justice system at all or anything with sociology and criminology, the Sociology of Poverty was the best class. Again, like Casey said, I'm really glad because in that class I read all the readings, and it's one of my favorite books. Living on $2 a Day in America is still one of my favorite books, and I still recommend it to people who are thinking about going into, you know, law or the criminal justice system or anything. Again, knowing how unfair it is for, you know, people of low income. It's just was a great class. And I actually think everyone at Ohio State, no matter what their major is, should be forced to take it going forward. But again, if you have the opportunity with Adam Long, especially, I would recommend it.
My favorite class was comparative religion. It was really interesting, you know, kind of walking through the intersections of, you know, different origins of religion and things like that. I think the most fascinating element of it for me is really challenging myself to think differently about how other people have experienced religion, how that's a lens through, you know, how they experience the world. And so that was the most fascinating class that I took.
I mean, there's definitely certain classes specifically that stand out to me, but for me, it was a lot more about the people teaching the classes. So the two names that come to mind when I heard that question were Debbie Wilson and Lynette Martin. I tried to take any class that either one of them offered because they just made it real. And they took every opportunity they could to you know, give you a real look at what you were going to be encountering outside of outside the walls of Ohio State. And so, you know, the other one that comes to mind is Sociology of Policing with the late great Richard Lundman, and just the requirement to that we had to do a ride along with Columbus Police, and you know, to be out in a cruiser, and we got to pick our precinct and shift that we rode with, and just to have that experience of you know, really seeing. You can read about it all day. You can read books about it until you're blue in the face, or be told to read books about it until you're blue in the face in my case. But you know, to be out and actually seeing it and experiencing it, and you know, recognizing, okay, these are the issues that are facing Linden that is, half a mile up the road from where I live. These are the real issues that we're learning about and how they play out in the real world. Was just really, really beneficial.
I will also add any class by Holly Niseth. I might be saying her last name incorrectly, and hopefully she's still there, but she is like amazing. I was like obsessed with her in undergrad. And also, if you're looking to go into grad school, she was super helpful with me in that, because I was honestly torn between, not really torn, but I thought about grad school versus law school and what that would be like. And she was super helpful in making a decision, because that's what she did. I think she has her PhD or something crazy like that. So that's really great. But also just any of the classes and are just so relevant to everyday life, especially all of the issues that like are now coming to light. Like we've been studying in our majors all along, so any of the classes are just so helpful for just everyday life.
That was cool. That was really cool to see somebody like name an instructor and everybody shake their heads. Like I've never seen that before. I haven't had that happen, but that was really fun to see. So advisors, when we meet to recap this, I'd like to hear more about those instructors, because you guys, I'm sure you all know who they are. So that was interesting. Well, I don't want to keep everybody too much longer. I have a few quick housekeeping items just to kind of share from the PowerPoint, but just knowing that I'm getting ready to wrap up. Are there any other questions from the students or from any of the advisors that you just want to hear before we kind of put a bow on the evening? Anything you've been wanting to know or hear about?
I was kind of curious, Claire, regarding your work as a paralegal. How did you have to take a specific course to get certified for that, or how did you prep for that?
No, I didn't. It was actually the learning curve is huge when you get there, but at least at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. No, it was just a bachelor's degree, and I think I was fortunate enough to have a lot of experiences in and around government work and the criminal justice system before going into it. I worked at the state attorney's office beforehand. I worked at the Department of Children and Families, and I worked at court-appointed special advocates of Franklin County in Columbus. So again, like we said, not really volunteer opportunities, but all of those things were unfortunately unpaid, as are a lot of internships in our field. So, even though that wasn't the best, it really prepared me to be able to speak to my experience as a support staff person in the legal field and going forward. So, like with any job, the learning curve is a lot, and especially with going from having zero legal knowledge to being, pretty integral in cases and having to educate yourself on New York State Penal Code on, how to investigate criminal prosecutions of, child sex abuse is a lot to learn within a couple months. But, just like everyone else does, you do it and you figure it out. And yeah, I've loved it ever since. So I'd really recommend being a paralegal and looking into it to anyone considering law school, or even if you're not really set on the legal field, investigations, anything like that. Being a paralegal is definitely a very educational way to go.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
All right. And any just last kind of parting shots from any of the alumni panelists? Any things that you talked about that you'd want to kind of drive home or just reemphasize or reiterate, or any I guess kind of tips for students moving forward? So wherever they're at in their careers, either looking for jobs or internships, just any piece of advice you'd want to give as they're moving forward?
Mark, the two things that stood out to me from your PowerPoint that you did at the beginning, just about doing research and kind of having that elevator pitch ready. The elevator pitch, I can't tell you how many times I gave a little, brief little spiel, especially when I was working at the State House. You're riding the same elevators as some pretty powerful people, state representatives up to the Speaker of the House. And so if you find yourself in proximity with people in power, take that opportunity. If there's someone there that might be able to, to help you out down the road, take that opportunity to make that connection. And so just having that in your back pocket is hugely beneficial. And then just about doing research and kind of knowing what you're walking into. I like to share the story of the very first interview I ever went on to be a probation officer. Is hands down the worst interview I've ever had in my life, because I'm from Lake County up in Northeast Ohio, and they had a posting. And so I applied, and I just kind of went into it thinking, hometown boy, I want to come back. I want to serve my community. Why wouldn't they want to hire me? And just kind of went in a little bit cocky and knew nothing about what he was asking me about. He was throwing out acronyms, and he asked me about motivational interviewing and about the ORAS. And I, at one point, I think I, might have actually done that in the interview. At least that's what it felt like. And so, just knowing what you're walking into and being able to answer questions intelligently, even if you're just kind of faking it, if you know just some buzzwords to make it to show that you put in the effort to, look into what they were going to be asking you, goes a really long way.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on that. And throughout my career, I've hired a lot of people in 25 years. And one of the things that early on I started to really look for when I was hiring talent for our organization, and I used to call it like they had the it factor. And then over time, as I kind of got a little wiser and older, I figured out I knew exactly what I was looking for, and Mark actually listed it out on what employers look for in someone. It was work ethic, it was taking initiative, it was leadership, it was that individual that's got grit, that will just get stuff done. And as you're developing your resume, as you're developing your leadership brand, try to think about how you find experiences that you can demonstrate through examples to where you do take that kind of initiative, you do drive forward, you don't sleep well if you haven't gotten something done. That's what employers are looking for in people that will have those kind of characteristics and competencies.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I would just add that, sometimes the path forward is ambiguous, and it's not clear that one opportunity may lead to the next. And so, if your gut is pushing you 51% in a direction, and that's the best that it can get, be decisive and take advantage of the opportunity, and, be strategic about how you're lining up your experience, and you're lining up your network, and you're lining up the sorts of things that you want to do that are going to help to get you 2 or 3 or 4 steps down the road. So just a quick trajectory. I was in undergrad, did a master's in urban planning. Economy was crashing. I was like, well, let's go to law school. And all of the debt later. I ended up in a position where Columbus State has just gotten a $320 million capital bond to do capital improvements on campus. So I get to bring in the urban planning experience. With the appointment from the Attorney General's office, I get to practice law. I worked at Ohio State at the Kirwan Institute for about 4 years doing research. And so at an academic institution, now I can bring that in as well. And so along the way, I had no idea how I was going to bring this together. But I kept taking opportunities to help me successively get a little bit closer to doing something that I love. And so the perfect opportunity may not exist, but I think as Steve was saying, you can try to have perfect execution, you can have, perfect grit, perfect resilience, and use that as a way to build momentum for yourself.
Good stuff. Thanks for sharing. I'm sure the students all, kind of appreciate this and getting some good advice from people who, the way I look at it, you guys walk the same mile in the same shoes as these folks. And so that was really why we, sought you out and wanted to bring you all in to talk about your experience. So thank you for those kind of last parting shots. As I said, I'm going to jump into some just real small housekeeping items, just a couple of things to wrap up the night. So just going to go back to a quick screen share. I dropped my email in the chat. So if you do need anything from me, students, if you want to follow up on anything, feel free just to shoot me a quick note. But the last couple of things I got here, if you don't have a handshake profile going yet, be sure to start that up and get it going. Get your resume posted on there. Kind of shocked how many students I actually talked to that don't know that you can post your resume on Handshake. Do that so recruiters can find you and can see what your experiences have been. So that if you maybe match up to their credentials of what they're looking for, then they can reach out to you for a potential position for an internship or a job. So please get on Handshake if you're not in there. If you're not in a career community, so hopefully you all know the way we have our office set up. We're divided up into communities. So as I said, I'm more focused on the marketing, advertising, and PR, and then the journalism, sports, entertainment, production communities. But we have people who are in communities that are a little bit more aligned to this type of industry. And her name is Brandy, and I know all the advisors know Brandy. We kind of help out and chip in and do things kind of cross communities almost. But if you're not a part of a community, to me, the biggest perk of being engaged with the communities directly is that all of the coaches send out things that are very specific to their communities. Sometimes we get job opportunities. If say Becca comes across an opportunity that somebody asked about an internship, maybe we didn't have it today, but maybe as she goes on, she learns and she floats that our way, and then we can send that out to the communities directly. And then we also, as career coaches, we send out bi-weekly newsletters, and those newsletters have a focus on your industry or your profession. So typically it starts off with a good story or some tips that you might want to use. And then we always post a handful of jobs or internships, and then events that are going on that are relevant to what you all are doing. And so it's the kind of the perk of the community. We want to build a community around this industry or profession. So if you're not a part of that, you join that off of Handshake. You're able to do that just from your profile, kind of like a small snippet on the right-hand side here, just of how you would get to it. Underneath your name, you would go to the career interest and you would pick them. And you could join multiple ones. It doesn't just have to be, towards this focus. Say like you do like marketing and advertising, but you don't have that major necessarily. You don't have to be in this major. You can just join this community and get information about it. So you can join as many as you want. So, but just know that you're going to get emails and information about that community. And then we developed a podcast about a year ago. And so if you haven't checked any of those out, go through there and see if there's anything. The way Bruce is our marketing manager, and he lists them out and he posts them, and they're always very detail oriented about who's speaking and what they're talking about. So if you've never looked at that, those are, you can get to those right from our website. They're 25, 30 minutes long, so it's not a huge investment of time. And so maybe checking out some industry. We try to bring in industry professionals from different walks of life that may give an overview about what their jobs are, what they do, how they got there, very similar to kind of what we did today, but in a very abbreviated time frame. So definitely go in and check those out. And then just easy ways to connect with us. We're everywhere. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram. We have the YouTube station. And then, if you're still kind of buzzing around Facebook, you can always check us out there too. But we're accessible anywhere under the sun. So those are my housekeeping items. I am all out of things to talk about for the evening. I am tapped out. So I want to thank everybody. Thanks so much for the advisors for helping me kind of get this together. Thank you so much to the panelists for coming and giving some of your time back to the students who, again, are doing things similar to what you were doing when you were in school. And to the students, I thank you too. I appreciate you stopping and coming, giving us some of your time today. I said this in my last Life Beyond degree, but it makes perfect sense. So students, I just put 5 panelists in front of you, and we talked a lot about networking. You probably kind of get where I'm going with this, right? So I gave you 5 people to try to network with. you have to try to find these people on LinkedIn, on social media. A couple people drop their, emails in the chat. I gave you 5 people to network with that are all, probably in some sort of industry that you may be interested in. So I would definitely advise, reaching out to them and seeing what they're doing and seeing how they can maybe help you out or share a little bit more of their story. But I think that would be, that would tell me that you learned something from today. So hopefully you do that. And that's all I got for the evening. So again, thank you for everybody for stopping out. We'll see you next time. Panelists, I'll be in touch tomorrow. I'll just touch base with you all just to check in. And that's all I got. So have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.